A powerful nor'easter barreled up the U.S. East Coast over the weekend, unleashing destructive winds, torrential rains, and widespread coastal flooding across Maryland. From Ocean City to the lower eastern shore, communities were inundated by storm surge and high tides, prompting emergency declarations, evacuations, and a scramble to protect critical infrastructure. The storm, which intensified off the Carolina coast late Friday, tracked northward with slow-moving fury, battering Maryland's coastline with wind gusts exceeding 55 miles per hour and relentless surf. Governor Wes Moore urged residents to stay vigilant and prepare for the worst, as the state activated emergency response protocols and deployed resources to vulnerable areas. Ocean City, a popular resort town on Maryland's Atlantic coast, was among the hardest hit. Streets near the boardwalk were submerged under several feet of water as king tides coincided with the storm's peak. The town issued multiple warnings urging residents to shelter in place and avoid travel, citing dangerous surf conditions and the risk of power outages. "We've seen flooding before, but this is different," said Ocean City Mayor Rick Meehan. "The combination of high winds, astronomical tides, and prolonged rainfall created a perfect storm. Our emergency crews are working around the clock to keep people safe." The Maryland Department of Transportation reported closures along key coastal routes, including portions of Route 528 and Route 50, where water levels breached roadways and stranded vehicles. In Worcester County, emergency shelters were opened to accommodate displaced residents, and sandbag stations were set up to protect homes and businesses. The nor'easter's slow progression exacerbated the flooding, with water levels remaining elevated for hours. This prolonged exposure stressed stormwater systems and overwhelmed drainage infrastructure not designed for such sustained inundation. In Salisbury, storm drains backed up across downtown, flooding basements and storefronts. City officials acknowledged that aging infrastructure contributed to the severity of the flooding and pledged to accelerate long-delayed upgrades. "We're seeing the consequences of deferred maintenance and climate-driven extremes," said Salisbury City Engineer Maria Thompson. "This storm is a wake-up call. We need resilient systems that can handle these new realities." Beyond urban flooding, the storm inflicted significant damage on Maryland's coastal ecosystems. Beaches and Chesapeake Island National Seashore suffered severe erosion, with dunes flattened and wildlife habitats disrupted. Park rangers reported debris scattered across protected areas and warned of long-term ecological consequences. "Storms like this reshape the coastline," said Dr. Lena Patel, a coastal geologist at the University of Maryland. "We're losing natural buffers that protect inland communities. Restoration will take months, if not years." The Chesapeake Bay also saw elevated water levels and increased turbidity, raising concerns about sedimentation and nutrient runoff. Environmental groups called for post-storm assessments to monitor water quality and habitat health. As the storm intensified Saturday night, power outages swept across coastal Maryland. Utility crews from Delmarva Power and Baltimore Gas and Electric worked through hazardous conditions to restore service, but thousands remained without electricity into Monday morning. The Maryland Emergency Management Agency, MEMA, coordinated response efforts, deploying high-water rescue vehicles and liaising with local governments. The National Guard was placed on standby, though not formally activated. "We're focused on life safety and rapid recovery," said MEMA Director Carla James. "Our teams are assessing damage, supporting local responders, and preparing for additional weather threats." In Crisfield, volunteers formed bucket brigades to clear floodwaters from historic buildings. In Ocean Pines, neighbors shared generators and supplies, embodying the spirit of mutual aid. "We've been through hurricanes and nor'easters before," said longtime resident Harold Jenkins. It's tough, but we pull together. That's what Marylanders do. Local officials emphasized the importance of preparedness and community engagement. Town halls were scheduled for later in the week to discuss recovery plans, infrastructure improvements, and climate adaptation strategies. Meteorologists noted that while nor'easters are common in the mid-Atlantic, the intensity and duration of the storm were unusual. Climate scientists warned that rising sea levels and warmer ocean temperatures could make such events more frequent and severe. This isn't just bad luck, said Dr. Patrice Nguyen of NOAA's Climate Prediction Center. We're seeing the fingerprints of climate change. Coastal communities must rethink how they build, plan, and respond. Governor Moore echoed these concerns in a Sunday press briefing, pledging to prioritize climate resilience in future infrastructure investments. We must learn from this storm, Moore said. Maryland's future depends on smart planning, strong infrastructure, and a commitment to protecting our people and environment. As damage assessments continue, Maryland officials are preparing to request federal disaster assistance. FEMA representatives arrived in Ocean City Monday morning to begin preliminary evaluations. However, residents expressed frustration over insurance hurdles and unclear coverage. I called my insurer and they said flooding isn't covered unless I have a separate policy, said homeowner Lisa Ramirez. I didn't know that. Now I'm facing thousands in repairs. Consumer advocates urged state lawmakers to improve public awareness and streamline claims processes. The Maryland Insurance Administration announced it would host virtual town halls to address concerns and guide residents through recovery. A powerful nor'easter swept up the East Coast over the weekend, slamming New Jersey with destructive winds, torrential rains, and widespread coastal flooding. Governor Phil Murphy declared a statewide emergency Saturday night, activating emergency services and urging residents to stay off flooded roads as the storm intensified.
And then look at this idiot.
The National Weather Service issued a coastal flood warning for the entire Jersey Shore, with high tides and persistent northeast winds driving water into bayside and oceanfront communities.
Creating a wake.
The warning remained in effect through Monday evening as the storm lingered offshore, prolonging the threat of inundation.
Slow down, dude!
In Ocean City, floodwaters surged into neighborhoods hours after high tide, with video footage showing streets transformed into rivers. Nearly 2 hours after high tide and it's still pouring in, posted local resident Tom Gilbert on social media.
Wow, how do you like it?
Emergency officials warned residents not to drive through flooded roadways or bypass barricades. Atlantic County's Office of Emergency Management advised motorists to avoid the white horse pike and black horse pike, both of which were submerged in sections. Travelers were directed to use the Atlantic City Expressway instead. We're seeing widespread roadway flooding in coastal and bayside communities, said a county spokesperson. In Cape May, storm surge overwhelmed bulkheads and flooded low-lying areas. Residents scrambled to protect homes with sandbags and pumps, while emergency crews conducted water rescues for stranded vehicles. The nor'easter's slow movement and sustained winds, gusting up to 60 miles per hour, exacerbated flooding and battered infrastructure. Power outages were reported across southern New Jersey, with utility crews working through hazardous conditions to restore service. Drainage systems in towns like Wildwood and Brigantine were overwhelmed, causing backups and street-level flooding. Our stormwater infrastructure wasn't built for this kind of prolonged surge, said Brigantine City engineer Carla Monroe. We're seeing the limits of our resilience. Beach erosion was also severe. Waves reaching 12 to 15 feet pounded the coast, stripping sand from dunes and exposing boardwalk foundations. Environmental officials warned that recovery could take months and would require emergency funding. Local governments activated emergency shelters and coordinated with the New Jersey Office of Emergency Management to deploy high-water rescue vehicles. The Red Cross opened temporary shelters in Atlantic and Cape May counties, offering food, blankets, and medical assistance. "We're focused on life safety and rapid response," said NJOEM Director Mark Jones. "Our teams are working with local officials to assess damage and support recovery." Despite the chaos, stories of resilience emerged. In Ventnor, neighbors helped elderly residents evacuate flooded homes. In Long Beach Island, volunteers distributed supplies and cleared debris from storm drains. "We've been through storms before, but this one feels different," said resident Angela Rivera. "The water came faster and stayed longer, but we're helping each other. That's what matters."
This car just came out. They're making
Meteorologists and climate scientists noted that while nor'easters are common in the region, the intensity and duration of the storm were exceptional. Rising sea levels and warmer ocean temperatures are contributing to more frequent and severe coastal flooding events. "This storm is a textbook example of climate-driven extremes," said Dr. Raj Patel, a climatologist at Rutgers University. "Persistent northeast winds, high astronomical tides, and warmer waters created a perfect setup for major flooding." Governor Murphy acknowledged the growing threat in a Sunday press briefing. "We must invest in resilient infrastructure and climate adaptation," he said. "New Jersey's coastal communities are on the front lines of climate change." A powerful nor'easter swept up the East Coast this weekend, delivering a brutal blow to North Carolina's coastal communities. With wind gusts exceeding 60 miles per hour and relentless surf pounding the shoreline, the storm triggered widespread coastal flooding, beach erosion, and structural damage from the Outer Banks to the southern beaches near Wilmington.
Right a couple inches from going in.
The National Weather Service issued multiple coastal flood warnings and high surf advisories as the slow-moving storm lingered offshore, pushing water inland and overwhelming infrastructure. Governor Roy Cooper declared a state of emergency late Saturday, mobilizing emergency response teams and urging residents to avoid flooded areas.
Heck yeah!
"This nor'easter is unlike anything we've seen in recent years," Cooper said. "The combination of high tides, persistent winds, and saturated ground has created dangerous conditions across our coast." In Buxton, a small community on Hatteras Island, dramatic footage captured the moment a beachfront home teetered on the edge of collapse. Surrounded by water and battered by waves, the greenhouse, already weakened by previous storms, was one of several structures at risk of falling into the Atlantic Ocean. "This is heartbreaking," said Mark Suddeth, a storm tracker who live-streamed the scene. "These homes were once safe. Now they're being swallowed by the sea." Local officials in Dare County reported extensive flooding along Highway 12, the main artery connecting the Outer Banks. Portions of the road were impassable due to overwash and debris, cutting off access to some communities. Emergency crews worked through the night to clear sand and restore limited mobility. Further south, in the Myrtle Beach area and along the Grand Strand, heavy rainfall combined with king tides to flood streets and erode beaches. Ocean Boulevard was closed in several sections, and beach accesses were shut down due to dune damage and unsafe conditions. The National Weather Service in Wilmington reported 3 to 5 inches of rain over the weekend, with more expected as the storm stalled offshore. Meteorologist Rachel Zuzias explained that the unusually high surf prevented normal drainage, leading to prolonged flooding in low-lying areas. "This is a classic nor'easter setup," Zuzias said, "but the intensity and duration are pushing our coastal systems to the brink." The storm's northeast winds battered power lines and infrastructure across coastal North Carolina. Cape Lookout recorded gusts of 61 miles per hour, and thousands of residents lost electricity as trees fell and transformers blew.
15-foot seas right now.
In New Hanover County, stormwater systems were overwhelmed, flooding roads and neighborhoods. Wilmington's downtown saw water pooling in intersections, and emergency crews deployed pumps to protect critical facilities. "We're seeing the limits of our infrastructure," said Wilmington Public Works Director James Holloway. "Our systems weren't designed for this kind of sustained surge." The environmental toll was severe. Beaches across the Outer Banks and southern coast suffered significant erosion, with dunes flattened and protective barriers breached. Wildlife habitats were disrupted, and marine debris littered the shoreline. Dr. Lena Patel, a coastal geologist at UNC Chapel Hill, warned that recovery could take months. "We've lost critical sand buffers," she said. "This storm has reshaped the coastline, and not in a good way." The North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality announced plans to conduct aerial surveys and assess long-term damage to coastal ecosystems. Despite the destruction, communities rallied. In Ocracoke, volunteers helped evacuate elderly residents and distribute supplies. In Carolina Beach, neighbors formed sandbag brigades to protect homes and businesses. "We've been through hurricanes, but this feels different," said resident Angela Monroe. "The water came faster and stayed longer, but we're helping each other. That's what matters." Emergency shelters were opened in multiple counties, and the Red Cross provided food, blankets, and medical support. The North Carolina Emergency Management Agency coordinated with FEMA to begin preliminary damage assessments. Climate scientists emphasize that while nor'easters are common, the severity of this storm reflects broader trends. Rising sea levels and warmer ocean temperatures are amplifying coastal storms, making them more destructive and frequent. "This isn't just bad luck," said Dr. Raj Patel of NOAA's Climate Prediction Center. "We're seeing the fingerprints of climate change. Coastal communities must adapt or face increasing risk." Governor Cooper echoed these concerns, pledging to prioritize climate resilience in future infrastructure investments. "We must build smarter and stronger," he said. "North Carolina's coast is worth protecting." As residents begin cleanup, many face uncertainty over insurance coverage. Flood damage is often excluded from standard homeowner policies, leaving families vulnerable. "I thought I was covered," said Buxton homeowner Lisa Ramirez. "Now I'm looking at tens of thousands in repairs and no help." The North Carolina Department of Insurance announced it would host virtual town halls to guide residents through claims and clarify coverage options. South Carolina's coastal communities are reeling from a week of relentless flooding triggered by a rare convergence of seasonal king tides and a powerful nor'easter sweeping up the Eastern Seaboard. From Charleston Harbor to Myrtle Beach, streets turned into rivers, beaches eroded, and residents scrambled to protect homes and businesses from rising waters. The National Weather Service issued multiple coastal flood warnings throughout the week, citing astronomical high tides, persistent onshore winds, and dangerous surf conditions. The combination of the full moon and the nor'easter's northeast winds created a prolonged flood threat, with water levels peaking nearly half a foot above normal in some areas. "This is one of the most widespread coastal flooding events we've seen in years," said NWS Charleston meteorologist Rachel Zuzias. "It's not just the rain. It's the tides, the wind, and the surf all working together." Downtown Charleston saw floodwaters creep into historic streets Friday afternoon, with video footage showing water lapping at storefronts and pooling in intersections. The city's low elevation and aging drainage systems made it especially vulnerable, and officials warned residents to avoid travel during high tide periods. Charleston's geography makes it a flood magnet, said city engineer Marcus Bell. We're seeing water back up through storm drains and spill over seawalls. It's a perfect storm of conditions. Emergency crews deployed pumps and barricades to protect critical infrastructure, while volunteers helped elderly residents evacuate flooded homes. The city opened temporary shelters and coordinated with the Red Cross to distribute supplies. Further north, Myrtle Beach and surrounding communities faced similar challenges. High surf and rip currents battered the coastline, eroding dunes and flooding beachfront roads. Ocean Boulevard was closed in several sections, and beach accesses were shut down due to unsafe conditions. The South Carolina Department of Transportation reported minor to moderate flooding along Highway 17 and other coastal routes. We're seeing water over the road in multiple locations, said SCDOT spokesperson Angela Monroe. Drivers should use caution and avoid flooded areas. Local businesses scrambled to protect storefronts with sandbags and plywood, while residents in low-lying neighborhoods moved vehicles to higher ground. Meteorologists warned that October's king tide cycle, driven by the gravitational pull of the full moon, would elevate water levels even without rainfall. When combined with the nor'easter's onshore winds, the result was widespread tidal flooding across Charleston, Colleton, and Beaufort counties. This is a textbook king tide event, said Dr. Lena Patel, a coastal geologist at the University of South Carolina. We're seeing water levels rise in tidal creeks, marshes, and urban areas. It's a reminder of how vulnerable our coast is. The South Carolina Emergency Management Division activated its coastal response plan, coordinating with local governments to monitor flood zones and deploy resources. Officials warned that additional flooding could occur during upcoming high tide cycles. The flooding caused significant damage to beaches, dunes, and coastal ecosystems. In Folly Beach, waves up to 6 feet stripped sand from protective dunes and scattered debris across the shoreline. Wildlife habitats were disrupted, and environmental groups called for post-storm assessments. Infrastructure also took a hit. Stormwater systems were overwhelmed, and several wastewater treatment facilities reported backups due to elevated water levels. We're seeing the limits of our infrastructure, said Charleston Public Works Director James Holloway. Our systems weren't designed for this kind of sustained surge. In Sullivan's Island, neighbors formed sandbag brigades to protect homes. In Mount Pleasant, volunteers helped clear storm drains and distribute bottled water. We've been through hurricanes and floods before, said resident Harold Jenkins. It's tough, but we pull together. That's what makes this community strong.